Welcome to week 7 of Women of Valor. We've been in this series for about 2 months, going through the women of the Bible and looking at life applications that we can receive from observing God's hands in the lives of the women that he had caused to be written in his word. And so this week we're going through Leah and Rachel. It's a tale of two sisters. This story is full of devotion and deception. It's full of emotional and physical struggles and laboring, literally, full of hard work and heartache. Yeah. And the story starts in Genesis chapter 29. So last week we left off discussing Jacob's mother, Rebecca, and the ordained blessing over Jacob's life and his deceptive nature, right? Those are two things that we were talking about. Now let's stop for a moment. You could have some character traits that are toxic and still have a calling on your life. A lot of people don't realize that. And then they say to somebody, oh, it can't be you. I know you, right? We knew Jacob, right? We knew some of the things that he was devising in his back pocket, and he still had a calling and a blessing on his life. You can need some things worked out and still have the hand of God directing you. It's through your close encounter with God that those traits begin to evolve into something that we are truly called to be. And so we're still in the story of Jacob, but we are discussing the women in this phase of his life. So let's talk about having a type, right? You know, this story, it brings us back to, this isn't a time where women chose men. It was more so that the man chose the wife. But in this day and age, when we talk about the type of men that we choose, the type of men that we allow in our lives, and the type of person that we are for the men that are coming to our lives, like who we are attracting to ourselves, it's ironic, and it's not how Jacob was attracted to Rachel. Right? Because from the moment that he met Rachel, the same place that his mother met his father's servant, the well, right? This was where he first laid eyes on Rachel and said in Genesis 29:9, he said, actually, let's go ahead and turn and read to that real quick. Genesis chapter 29, starting at verse 9. I'll give you a moment to get there. It says, now while he, I'm talking about Jacob, was still speaking with them, Rachel came in with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess. And it came to pass, when Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, that Jacob went near and rolled the stone from the well's mouth, watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother. They had to say that 3 times, right? Then Jacob kissed Rachel and lifted up his voice and wept. And Jacob told Rachel that he was her father's relative and that he was Rebekah's son. So she ran and told her father, because apparently family gatherings tend to happen at the well, right? Where some distant relative comes, sees you, cries, kisses, and you run off, right? That's apparently what happens here, right? And then in verse 13, and then it came to pass, when Laban heard the report about Jacob, his sister's son, that he ran to meet him and embraced him and kissed him and brought him to his house. So he told Laban all these things, and Laban said to him, surely you are my bone and my flesh. And he stayed with him for a month. Then Laban said to Jacob, because you are my relative, should you therefore serve me for nothing? Tell me, what should your wages be? Now Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the elder was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah's eyes were delicate, but Rachel was beautiful of form and appearance. Now Jacob loved Rachel, so he said, I will serve you 7 years for Rachel, your younger daughter. And Laban said, it is better that I give her to you than that I should give her to another man. Stay with me. So here's the basis for this whole story. Jacob met Rachel at the well. You might say it was love at first sight. Jacob was a shepherd. Rachel was a shepherdess. His mother, Rebecca, watered the camels of his father's servant. And what did Jacob do? He watered Laban's sheep, right? this reciprocal behavior that you're seeing here. So you can say that they were drawn to each other because of the types of person that they were. They were also both second born, striving for the birthright of the first.
Oh my God.
Did you catch that?
Caught it right now.
Yeah.
Also, where did Moses meet his wife, Zipporah?
Oh,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And
Well,
he was in the desert. We know that.
she was going to the well and she was fighting them off, and he helped her. Yeah. Yep.
and where did Jesus meet the woman at the well?
At the well. Right.
At the well.
Jacob's well.
Right.
Jacob's well.
Jacob's well. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yep. Start digging your
Well,
wells.
the well is a gathering place.
Mm-hmm.
And don't forget, this also is an area of refreshment.
Yeah. It's a place of life.
It's a
Because
place
without
of life.
water,
Living water.
That's
living
right, living
waters.
water. Correct, Mom. Correct.
Mhm.
Living water. And in the desert environment, the place you're going to go is to a well where you're going to refresh yourself and recover yourself. And that's where everybody's like, ooh, you look pretty. Because you're not all dried up and you put water in your face.
You ain't been standing out in the sun, right?
Yeah, you know, the sun, but now but that was like, think of it as the first club to go to back in the day, where you
I'm gonna go to the well. I'll meet you there.
Go to the well, meet you at the well, girl. You know, but the well was a place of refreshment,
Yeah.
invigorating.
When I put that together, it's like, wow, this is Jacob's well. And Jesus came to the same well, Jacob's well, to meet the woman at the well.
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah.
same
It's
place.
amazing.
I was trying to Google how many years from that point to when Jesus came.
Over 2,000 years.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, probably about 3, actually. Probably about
Mhm.
3,000.
Over 2,000 years.
Because you're talking about BC until when he arrived.
Basic.
Mhm.
Yeah. So yeah, you're exactly right. Jacob saw Rachel tending to something familiar because she was a shepherdess, just as he was, right? She wasn't afraid of hard work. Let's go ahead and put that out there. She was not afraid of doing some hard work out in the middle of the day when it was not best for the flock out. It's hot, it's high noon, and there she is doing what is needed. But just as his mother arrived at the right time, so did Rachel, right? Just as he's arriving, same thing, right? He saw her as beautiful. The Bible said that Rachel was beautiful in form and appearance. Leah, however, they simply said she was weak-eyed. That is so mean. In layman's terms, she was cockeyed. How cruel, right? That's what that means. She
Oh
was
my
cockeyed.
God, Jenny,
Yeah.
I'm so happy you said that. I was sharing that when I was studying when Pam had a break, and she goes, "So they calling her cockeyed?" And I said, "No, I know what Jenny tells us what that means. I'm pretty sure there's a different biblical term, so I'm gonna have to tell her you were right," because she was like, "So they just gonna call her cockeyed?" She was like, "It wasn't bad enough that she's marrying her cousin." So I'm like, "Well, I understand." I'm like, "I don't understand why they're marrying first cousins." I said, "We would never do that today. I don't know at what point that changes in the Bible." I said, "But it's common. I'm seeing a theme here that, you know, first cousins are marrying." But she was like, "Oh, so they just called her cockeyed. Just call her cockeyed." So yeah, that is hilarious.
Yeah, the Bible tells it just like it is.
We
Just
got
like
But
it is.
in the commentary, the way they say it that it probably meant that her eyes were pale color rather than the dark and sparkling eyes most common. Such paleness was viewed as a blemish.
Mm.
I'm just reading what it says.
They,
You know, in every other commentary I read, it
Yeah,
said she
they
was
said hard on
cockeyed.
the eyes.
Yep. It's mean.
they didn't get the ophthalmologist scientific phrase of it, you know, cockeyed.
They left no
Cockeyed.
no
Go ahead.
other description of her.
Yeah. They're
Exactly.
being nice. They're being nice.
Mhm. Yep. So to Jacob, Rachel was worth 7 years of labor.
Mm.
Right? We ain't talking about
14.
sitting behind a desk. Oh, we'll
14.
get there because this was his first promise, right? That's not a normal bride price. That's usually like 50 shekels, right? We talk about, oh, that the ring should cost a month's worth of salary. I don't even believe in that, but we're talking 7 years of hard work.
But Jacob didn't have anything to bring. He didn't have any camels. He didn't
He
have any
didn't.
goats. He didn't have any sheep. He had nothing.
He had the staff in his hand
That's right.
and the name, the family name, right?
Family name.
Oh, that in itself, Jenny, the staff in his hand.
Mm-hmm. Yep, got him there. So I want y'all to imagine something. 7 years of picturing your life. You're engaged or betrothed or whatever you want to call it. You're anticipating your wedding night for 7 years, right? You've picked out what you're going to wear, who's standing where, what y'all going to eat, what you're going to name your kids. 7 years.
That's a woman, but not a man.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was saying, Jan.
Right. 7 years, but look at that. 7 years of staring at this man, knowing this is going to be my husband, right? Only to see someone else standing in your place. Nothing you did, nothing he did, but that night was stolen from you.
So Jenny, I have a quick question because this is like coming up again where the men don't know that they're sleeping with the wrong woman, just like with the daughters that slept with their father and they got him drunk. And are we assuming that he was intoxicated because there was a feast and that's why he did not know that?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely,
Okay.
because it says that. So I'll get there. It definitely, thank you for bringing that up. It says that. Now when we're talking about Abraham's nephew Lot and his daughters getting him drunk to sleep with him, they knew full well what they were doing. They got him drunk before. This is different, right? Many would say that Jacob got his trickster traits from his uncle Laban, right? Or at least I would say that. I would say that. Deception and heartache, right? Deception ran in that side of the family. But deception and heartache were heavy on those nights, right? Where was Rachel as her sister stood in her place?
But she knew.
In the wedding tent. Yeah, you know what?
They knew that was tradition in that time that the oldest female.
Her father made an agreement.
Yeah, you
right?
can have her. Yeah.
Her father, pretty much what we would do today, shook hands on it, wrote a contract, right? So why would I think anything different if this is what you agreed on? But where was she, right? When her sister was in the wedding tent consummating the marriage that was supposed to be hers, I would be sick.
But
I would have to be restrained somewhere, honestly. So
that's what I was saying. I'd be screaming at the top of my lungs.
right.
But you're talking now because you have knowledge of this. We have knowledge. So back then it was, you accepted it and you went on.
These women did not accept it.
No.
They definitely didn't. Right. So, I mean, later on, right? So there's a question as to what Laban might have done with Rachel during this time, right? So we know that during those wedding feasts, they wore these heavy veils. You could not see through them. So Trevor, that's one plot to your question. And then there is also the question that Rachel did stand in for the first half of the wedding, but it says in the Bible that at night he took Leah and brought her to the tent.
Well, then they wasn't really married?
No, because when you consummate a marriage, that's it, right? So there is heavy drinking during these week-long wedding feasts. And so at night when there's no candles, right? And there's no Edison out there. Yeah, right. He's drunk. Here's my wife. Thanks. Waiting for this for, almost a decade here. Right. So I want y'all to picture what that would be like, but we don't know where Rachel was taken, because if I talked, you'd obviously know the difference between my voice and somebody else's, right?
Now, I guess to the point how drunk he was.
Well, he wasn't that drunk.
Real drunk,
right? He consummated the wedding, but obviously Leah's eyes would have had to at least be covered, because that was the one characteristic that we're told about from Leah, right? Let's just go ahead and say.
Cover those eyes. Okay.
And that's why her father had to lead her there, right? So let's turn the tables. I can go all day. Let's turn the tables. Leah was the firstborn, right? She's supposed to be the first one to leave the house in marriage, according to that custom, according to that culture. but she knows that physically her sister takes center stage. Did she mourn as her sister prepared for marriage? Did Rachel gloat about her future husband and Leah feel like this was a joy that she was never going to experience? Sibling rivalry is the worst. And when you feel like there's nothing that you can do to measure up, it adds insult to injury. So the deception continues, right? Leah enters into the wedding tent and does nothing to alert Jacob to her true identity. She just doesn't. There's no talk about her fighting against this plot. She goes in and she consummates the marriage that the groom did not agree to work for. There's a great chance that, yes, Jacob was drunk because the wedding feast does consist of a lot of wine. We know that from Jesus' storytelling of how he turned the water into wine just so people could keep drinking, right? And if the wedding started with Rachel, it still ended with Leah that night. It says in the morning that Jacob saw her and he said to her father, their father, "What is this that you have done to me?"
What the heck?
Can't take that back, right? This reminds me of the bait and switch he pulled on his own father, disguising himself as his brother Esau.
Seed time, harvest time, seed time.
Seed time, harvest time. Look what you got. Look what you did.
Chickens
You
come
came-
home to
came-
roost.
But think about that. He came to his father during his father's time of night, right? It was daytime for him, but his father could no longer see. His eyes were useless to him. And so his father was deceived. And Jacob was deceived when his eyes were useless to him. Man. Watch what you do, right? Let it
Chickens come
back
home
to
to
you.
roost.
Exactly.
Chickens come home to roost.
Yep. Now let's turn a little bit towards Laban. I know that we are discussing the women of the Bible, but again, I think that it's important that we look at all aspects of who we're connected to because it tells a bigger story, right? Now let's turn to Laban, father with 2 daughters during this time of his life. And it does say in later verses that Laban has sons, right? So it's possible that his sons were either older and married off into their own families, because remember, it took Rebecca 20 years before she conceived Esau and Jacob. Or Laban had really young sons, or even both. Excuse me. Because Rachel was tending to the sheep when we first are introduced to the family. So the sons were not of that age or around at that time. So yeah, Laban has these 2 daughters, one who has no problem finding a husband and one who may never know love. This may have been the only chance at husbandry that Leah would ever get. And not be abused at that. Somebody that he could trust and hold accountable. So Laban literally took a shot in the dark and it worked.
Guess what? This is all God's plan.
It's all God's plan. Well, let's take that back. God knows what we're going to do. God has his plan. We have our plan. God works out our plan for what will be used for his plan. Because a lot of the things that we do is not part of God's plan, but he takes the outcome of that and says, now watch the magic that I make. Watch the beauty that I will turn from the ashes that you gave me.
Beauties for ashes.
Yep. So at this moment, the marriage is consummated, right? He's officially married to Leah, nothing he can do about it, deceived or not. So Laban strikes a deal in his treachery for another 7 years for Rachel. So in reality, yes, Mom, Jacob worked 14 years for Rachel and got Leah as a bonus. Rachel, he was given immediately after that first week, so he didn't have to wait another 7 years, but he did have to work the 14 years for the both of them. And it says Rachel was loved and Leah was not, right? And then it says that God opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. This is in verse 31. So according to this very verse, this scripture, both of them were technically barren until this point. Otherwise, it would not need to say God opened her womb, right? And this is actually where we learn the most about Leah and Rachel. The back and forth that happens here as they fight for the attention of their husband creates the 12 tribes of Israel, born out of love and despair. So when you listen closely, Leah explains all her emotions in the 6 sons that she bears for Jacob. The first son, the Lord has surely seen my affliction. That's Reuben, right? Rachel felt afflicted in her marriage, in her appearance, in her lack of love, her second son, because the Lord has heard that I am unloved, he has given this son also, and that's Simeon. So even with the only son born to Jacob, she still felt unloved. And so God gave her a double portion. That is what she's exclaiming here. Yep.
And
The
not
third,
just that,
go ahead.
but through through Leah, came Judah
Mm-hmm.
and the lineage of Jesus.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So her third son, now this time my husband will be attached to me, Levi. Listen to these names. She felt cast aside. 3 years of being pregnant and she still feels isolated and ostracized.
But
These
she still had
pregnancies were-
hope. She still had hope. When she says this time he will be, she'll do anything just to try and hope that maybe he'll change his mind about me.
Mhm. I am his wife, right? Maybe he'll change his mind.
You're muted, Diane.
I keep pressing the wrong side of my pad here. And she's already given him 3 sons. And how much more love can you get in that time by having sons? That's the whole thing about your life and your legacy.
Yeah.
I'm giving him 3 sons, now 4. My wealth grows.
Mhm. She was bringing him increase, even though he didn't love her. Yeah. And so, like you said, Mom, 4th son, now I will praise the Lord, Judah. This is where Leah stops worrying about Jacob for a moment and praises the Lord for the increase that she's been given. And I love that Judah, praise is where she stops for a moment to just lift up the Lord. And like you said, this is where the line in which our Savior Jesus comes through. It comes through her.
And also the Levitical.
The Levites, yeah.
Levites.
Mhm.
Ah.
Mhm. Exactly.
All through her.
Mhm. Yep.
Both women are, are special.
They're both instrumental to the future of the 12 tribes of Israel.
And when you said God opened her womb, right? And so that came to me like the children are born at a set time. It's not just, any time. He
Mhm.
opened her womb at the set time.
Yeah. Exactly.
Because in the fullness of time, Jesus came.
Yeah. It took Jacob 20 years to be permitted, right? It took Sarah 90 years to give birth, right? In the fullness of time. When we say, what are you waiting for? I'm waiting for God's time. I'm waiting for God's timing, really. Yep. Yep. So now we're in chapter 30, right? And we see Rachel act out in her jealousy. So up until her sister taking her wedding night, Rachel didn't have a reason to even compete with her sister. She didn't have a need to. It's not to say that Rachel was lazy and too good to do anything except rely on her looks, not at all, because our first encounter with her, she was taking care of the sheep in the heat of the day. But Leah now knew a love that was completely foreign to Rachel and something to brag about, a different kind of happiness. Ladies, when you start to experience emotions that are not productive, stop what you are doing. That's when you need to take your thoughts captive, right? This is what got Abraham and Sarah in trouble. Because in Rachel's jealousy, she takes her handmaiden to sleep with her husband and have a child through surrogacy, right? Page out of her ancestors' book, right?
Like Sarah.
Yeah. Sarah didn't want to come between Abraham and the blessing that God had for him. She was still wrong, but her motive was out of love. Rachel just wanted to compete with her sister. So now Bilhah is brought into this situation and made a concubine. Not only does she force this upon her maid, but she takes her maid's son and names him, right? You get to have him, but I'll name him, I'll raise him, he'll be my kid, right? And she names him Dan, saying, God has judged my case. and he has also heard my voice and given me a son. Rachel felt like she needed an advocate. This was her exclamation about how she felt about what was going on. Like her voice was taken. She could have had joy in her sister's son, but that's not what she did. Bilhah conceives again to another son, and Rachel names this one also. And she says, with great wrestlings, I have wrestled with my sister, and indeed I have prevailed. And this is the son Naphtali. The question is, what did she win? I've wrestled with my sister, and indeed I have prevailed. I won. What did you win? Rachel felt like this was an ongoing battle, and it was. They contended with each other, but for what? They both had the same husband. This fertility war continues with Leah giving her maid as a second concubine, or as another concubine to Jacob, since she stopped conceiving after Judah, right? So now Zilpah is dragged into this whole family affair, and Zilpah conceives, and Leah calls out, a troop comes. I think this is hilarious at this point, right? Here comes another boy. Look, I got a troop coming on my way, and named him Gad. This shows how Leah felt like she was at war, and she was amassing an army to defend her. She felt like she needed to be defended. She had 4 sons of her own, 2 from her maid, and she still felt like she needed to be defended.
She wasn't loved.
She wasn't loved.
She always felt that she wasn't enough.
She had nobody in her corner.
There was no mention at all that he ever loved her.
Well, I'm gonna turn your eyes
Well, he
on
kept
that a little
going
bit.
into bed with her.
Yes, but
She hired
also
him.
he
Oh,
I
thank
know
you for
she
saying that.
I know she was buried with him,
With
in
him.
the same thing, but they said, this one person I was listening to, they said, I think that was just because of convenience. Because
Timing, like you said, timing. It was the timing, exactly the location they were at, because when they buried Rachel, she was buried like somewhere by the side of the road, because I was listening to that.
Yep.
And it was like, it just, you died there. What am I gonna do here? Keep the body and keep going until I get to where I'm going? You'll decay.
I'm glad you brought that up. We'll definitely be discussing that because those are all very key points. Yep. So Zilpah had the second son, and Leah exclaims, for the daughters will call me blessed. Why would the daughters call her blessed with now these 6 sons? It's because she's got many sons to offer these daughters, right? Take your pick, pretty much. That's what she's saying. And she's boasting, she's gloating. So this son's name was Asher. The dynamic between the 2 sisters was forever at odds because of what their father did. And the Bible talks about the sins of the father, right? And how that bleeds over into generation after generation. When Leah's son goes out to the field and finds a medicinal plant called mandrakes, right? It's the root of a flower. Some say it was thought to increase fertility. And they thought it was anyway. So Rachel offers Jacob for a night in exchange for the roots that Reuben found. She hires her own husband. This is interesting because he is technically Leah's husband. She is his first and actually true wife. We know that she feels this way because she says to Rachel, is it not enough that you've taken my husband? You want my son's mandrakes too? You want what my son brings to me? You want everything that everybody that I love takes, and brings to me? I have nothing, pretty much. So Leah conceives again, and she says, God has given me my wages because I have given my maid to my husband. I don't think that was it. That's still what she said. She named him Issachar, right? She felt like she earned this son, that this was a true labor. She was now working at pushing out these kids. She was working for love. She was working for attention. And this was her wages. This was her earnings. And then she conceives a 6th time and says, God, this was funny. God has endowed me with endowment, right? Filled me with fullness. And so now my husband will dwell with me because I've borne him 6 sons. And his name was Zebulun. She felt like now maybe because I have a house full of sons, her 6 and her maids 2, 8 of them, that she'll finally have her husband's company. He'll finally come and draw near to her, not just for a night.
I just think
I wonder where
about,
he slept when he's not sleeping with
Rachel.
Oh, that's it.
Yeah.
That was my question, because I'm like, so it's already, I don't know, I struggled with the whole story, but I guess it's because of the times we're living in now. So I'm trying to imagine these sisters. And it's like, that's just, I can't imagine being with my sister. I'm sharing my husband. Like,
Absolutely
that's just,
not.
I can't, so that I had to keep reading over and over because I'm just like, this can't be right. This can't be right. But when she said you can sleep with him tonight, so at what point did he stop sleeping with her? Because she had up until that time 4 sons.
I'm glad you
So
brought that up.
Because that's what I'm trying to figure out. Like, if you have the one that you want and you never wanted the other sister, what is the point at that point in sleeping with the other sister? Like, is the one that you want denying you? So that's why you're going to the sister? You didn't want her originally. So what
right,
what is that
but
there?
yet
We're
you're
having a
sleeping with her at some
conversation and you're
point.
telling me I love you, never wanted your sister, but some nights you decide, hey, yeah, I love you, but you know, your sister's calling, so I'm gonna go over there. Like, that
Right.
don't work.
Right. No, it don't work at all. But I want you to see, and I'm glad y'all all picked up on that. We have a little bit of a glimpse in that when Rachel says, I will loan out my husband to you for what you have to offer me.
so it's like by law, he has to be intimate with Leah.
And he did, right? There's no law
Because
saying that he has to
he was the
continually.
first wife.
Yeah.
I think
There's no law saying that he has to continually. He consummated the marriage. That was all that was required of him. But it seems from what we are reading here that this is not the first time that Leah hired her own husband from Rachel, right? Because this was comfortable. You're muted, Diane.
Can't hire
Right,
nobody. He was over there because he wanted to be. If he ain't want to be there with that girl, ain't no way he would have been over there. I don't believe that.
But remember, we're talking 20th, 21st century mentality. Remember, we're dealing with this. That was a whole different ballgame back then.
Yeah.
You know, we don't know what Laban told Jacob as far as you hanging with me, I'll give you all these goats and sheep and land. We don't know because it was never specified.
But
I'm sure there was some behind the scenes handshake, nod and wink.
But what we do know is that Leah was able to conceive. So maybe that's another reason why he kept going back to her.
Because Rachel's womb was closed.
Yep. But
Okay, that I'm about to say that makes sense for me, because thinking with an old school mindset, there was nothing that any woman could do if the man didn't want to do it to force her. She didn't have no power like that.
except to have a child.
Right.
Yep.
we have to also remember this is not God's original plan, because it was just man and woman, Adam and Eve, not 2 wives.
Yeah, not
Yeah.
this sister wife
Concubines.
scenario.
Yeah.
Right. Definitely not. And it's for reasons like this, the animosity that was built in his family.
Well, you look in terms of, Sarah gave Abraham her handmaid servant.
How'd that work out?
Not good.
She bore a son, and that got ugly. She sent her away.
It started a whole nother religion, is what it did.
It was an
It
Arab
deviated
nation.
from God's plan.
Uh-huh.
Yep. Yep. It
Because
deviated
he
from God's
he saw that Abraham loved his son Ishmael. So he says, do not worry, because he's going to be a great nation.
And
See, God wasn't bad to him.
he wasn't lying. God can't lie.
But Isaac was just a product of the time.
A promise.
A promise, right? A promise. He was the
Covenant. He was the result of a
promised one.
covenant.
Yeah.
Yep. So yeah, I do. From what we see here and how easily Rachel was like, well, if you give me this root, I'll send him over there. And then them giving him the handmaids and go sleep with her, like it really seemed like they were more in control than he was. Right.
It's
And
like,
now
where am I going tonight?
Yeah. I don't even want to say poor thing, right? But like, you're out all day tending to the flock in the heat, and then where am I going? I don't know. Okay. All right. So Yeah, this was his situation. But it's not something that he desired. Keep that in mind. He only signed up for Rachel.
He was signed up for Rachel.
He did. He said, I'll give you 7 years for Rachel. Okay. 4
I'm
years.
laughing at Miss Diane's face because you said that and she looked like, okay.
Yeah.
Sure,
I don't
that's
think
not
she's
something he
buying it.
desired.
She ain't buying
Yeah,
it.
yeah, you
I
should
don't
see
think
my
any
face.
of us are
Mhm,
buying
yeah.
it.
Yeah, right.
He only
You
contracted
guys, I really
Rachel.
just don't want to do this, I don't. I
Please
no.
stop. No, right.
Right.
If I had my druthers.
Yeah, exactly. So that is what we were walking into with this.
But she just kept on trying to have, they both, well, Rachel couldn't, but kept on trying to have kids in order to get love.
Mhm.
And
Rachel had
get
his
self-
love.
get self-worth
Mhm.
when love is free. It's a sad thing that women still today, we
There you
do.
go. There you go.
Mama, you hit it. You hit the nail on the head.
Right there.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
that DNA that just continues. It's embedded in DNA that just manifests itself into this situation where we do have people who are, having 1, 2, 3, 4 children for the love of a man that would never be.
Right.
Mm.
That love only comes
I
from
always
God.
remember Teresa my sister Terry, she used to say, no baby's gonna hold no man. She said,
Nope.
don't try it, it don't work.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And this is
Especially
almost-
these day and age.
Yeah.
But how many relationships do we know where couples were on the outs, they separate maybe, and then they get back together, and then what happens? A baby comes.
Mhm.
And then a few years later, the relationship is back to being fragmented and they're gone.
Well, think about that. Sometimes they are only staying together for the children.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But sometimes, even with the children, it just doesn't work, which is sad because they're so focused on each other as opposed to like, let's see what we can do to
And it's
make
a different time.
Oh,
Back then, divorce was so different from the easy sign of a paper that it is now.
Mhm.
Um,
It was a hush hush thing.
mm.
It's not,
Right.
it was not something that,
it was not common at all.
you can talk. Yeah, you didn't talk about it openly.
It wasn't common.
It was
You
a
stayed-
shame. You know
stayed
what
in the
you're showing?
situation.
That your marriage was a failure,
Mhm.
that you failed.
Mhm.
It always looks like the woman failed.
Mhm,
Mhm.
mhm.
It does. That's a burden that we bear because then we're the one that's marred at the end of it.
We're not good enough.
We're not good enough. We're defiled.
Yeah.
We are used at that point, right? That all these things that we're considered, and it's hurtful. Yep. So then Leah
And
gives birth to Dinah at this point. What was that, Melva?
yeah, I was about to say, even in the midst of divorces, I think people forget to really explain to the children, what the divorce is, and so that they are not subject to repeat that same thing over again.
Mm-hmm. It's true.
Because all of the actions as a parent is training. Majority of the training for children is based upon a lot of action that parents take, and they don't understand why they see certain things resonate in their children's lives, and some of them do understand why they see these things resonate in the lives of their children, and they won't speak to those situations because of embarrassment, because they know where it derives from. And so it continues as an on and on and on and on cycle until someone actually speaks to the situation to say, hey, we're going to correct that. We're going to make a correction. We're going to make change in the midst of this thing that I can see that is derived from generation to generation, that keeps flowing from generation to generation.
Well, you hit it, because we discuss so many other things except our flaws with our children, right?
Mm-hmm.
Our mistakes. And so if we don't discuss our mistakes with our children, then they're going to make the same mistakes, right? That whole, those who are ignorant of history are condemned to relive it. And so you've got the whole thing with Abraham and his son Isaac both not being able to defend their wives against Abimelech, right? As he's looking at the same thing, right? This generational thing. We've got
Yep.
the fact that Rebecca's husband prayed for her and God opened her womb. Why are we not talking about those type of things, right? Why are we not talking about how to follow God's footsteps and to turn your confusion into a celebration, right? Having that clarity from God. If Sarah would have just went to God and said, what's the plan, rather than creating her own, how drastically different things would be, right? So we do have to discuss these things. It's not comfortable. We call that airing our dirty laundry. Nobody likes that. But there's no healing if you keep your wound festering inside.
Right.
Yeah.
Devil loves secrets.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Loves it.
he likes dark places.
Yes, I had a pastor. I probably told y'all this before. I remember him saying it clearly on the pulpit one day in Germany. He said, "You want to know how to stop the devil from keeping your secrets to be a tool?" He said, "Just tell it. Just tell it. No matter what it is, the devil can't use it against you if you just tell it."
Give your testimony.
Mm-hmm.
You're overcome by your testimony. You know, you overcome a multitude of grief and fear and anguish by giving your own testimony, because after that, nobody can hold anything over your head that you're willing to admit on your own.
Exactly. Because you're being honest about it. And so that's a perfect segue here, because now Rachel finally is honest about what's going on inside of her. And she turns to God and she begs of him. She's like, you know, when she first came to her husband and said, "Give me children or I'll die." And he says, "I didn't do this. I'm not in God's place," right? But here, instead of turning to her husband, she turns to God. Now we know it's because the scripture says God listened to Rachel and opened her womb. So what does that show us? God listens. That means that we must speak. Not that
She wasn't talking any time.
Right. Not just that he listens, but that he doesn't just listen to men or to priests or to those who are perfect. The Bible says that he is close to the brokenhearted. Right? And so Rachel turns to God for once. And it's when Rachel turned to God that she was given a child. So she gives birth to Joseph, and she said, "God has taken away my reproach, my shame." How painful. She spent nearly a decade dreaming of being this wife, right? 7 years of being this wife, only for her sister to enjoy the wedding night and to bear their husband children. She watched him become the father of 10 children. She simply wanted the life that she dreamt about. And she also said, "The Lord shall add to me another son," right? And it's after Joseph is born that Jacob decides to leave Laban's house, and he hears from God to return back to the land of his fathers, and that he will be with him. God will be with him in this journey. And it's on this journey that we find out that Rachel worshiped idols. She stole them from her father's house. And when Leah gave birth to a child, she lifted up that child's name to God in prayer, right? But when Rachel, this woman of a double mind, when she did, it was my shame is gone. She did it out of spite, right? And when they left, she went in secret and she took the idols in her father's house. And when her father came looking for them, in chapter 31, verse 31, Jacob answers Laban and said, "I was afraid because I thought that you would take your daughters away from me by force. But if you find anyone who has your gods, that person shall not live." Jacob didn't even realize that he cursed Rachel. He had no idea that she had stolen the gods. Little g. Now, what does this say about Rachel? They were not lacking in anything, yet she desires to take what wasn't hers even still. She had Jacob's heart and his preference, even to the point where when his brother Esau was coming out to meet him with 400 men, he separated his wives in love order, right? He put the concubines up first with their kids, And then he put Leah and those 7 kids. And then he put Rachel and
Her
Joseph.
at the end. I didn't miss that. I caught that. I was like, oh, look at him. Nope. He's gonna still save her and then his kids with her at the end. I'm like, look at yeah. That was a hot mess.
Yep.
Hot mess.
Yep. Just in case he comes and kills the first, my favorite's in the back. That's what he did. Right?
That's sad, man.
It is sad because those were all still his children. So what did Rachel not have? Yet she's still going out and taking what was not meant for her. Right? So some years later, Jacob and the family are on their way to Bethel, and Rachel is in labor with her second son. And while she is dying, she names her son Ben-Oni, which means son of my sorrows, son of my pain. And she was buried there on the way to Bethlehem, like you said, on the side of the road.
Side of the road.
Mm-hmm. Now we know that the name was changed to Benjamin, which means son of my right hand rather than son of my sorrows. That's horrible. But let's go on and examine one more thing. Where were they buried, right? Genesis 49:29-31, it says where Jacob states that Leah was buried in the same place as Jacob's father and mother and as his grandmother and grandfather, and where he told his sons to take him when he passed, right? That was the instruction, take my bones back there. Rachel was buried on the side of the road on the way to their next destination. But Jacob gave strict instructions to bring his bones back to where Leah was.
I thought that was Joseph that says, don't leave my bones here.
Was it?
No, that was Jacob.
No, it was when Jacob died.
Yeah,
Mhm.
because when he died in Egypt.
Because his 12
Oh, that's
sons,
right. That's right. That's right.
his 12 sons brought them back when they all, well, at least the tribes, they all brought them back.
Pharaoh said, go go bury your father.
Yep, this was
In
what
50, in
400
56, it said, go and bury your father as he made you swear to do.
Yep, back with Leah, not with Rachel. There was a pillar set up for where Rachel was born, but he went back to where Leah was.
I think he just went back to his father and mother.
Which also says that he could have carried Rachel back to
But he
where
didn't.
they were.
But he did not.
He didn't.
He did not. He
What a
left them.
twist. What a twist. Out of all that love, right? He demanded that his bones be brought back, but he left hers there. He could have gone back for her.
But
When Leah died,
married to her.
when Leah died, she didn't die right next to the cave, right? She was taken there.
Because
Something
Leah was married to him.
Mhm.
She was technically married to him and Rachel was not.
Yeah.
So in essence, she was the first wife, so she would get all the
Inheritance.
yes,
All the rights.
all the rights.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Mm.
according to this biblical account, what does God want from us as women? He wants us to be loved. And when God saw that Leah was unloved, he opened her womb so that Leah could experience love. And when we call on God, he listens to our cries. He hears our heart's desires. And through these 4 women, Jacob was given a lot of increase. And we talk about that a lot, right? The women of valor who bring increase to their families, right? When he fled from his father's house and his twin brothers' death threats, all he had was a staff in his hand. But when he left his father-in-law's house, he had 12 children, or 11 and 1 on the way, a huge string of flocks of lambs, goats, cattle, donkeys, male and female servants, all of that. He was pretty comfortable. He had been gone 20 years because he worked 14 years for Rachel and then another 6 for the flocks, right? So we know that at the time that he left, his oldest son could not have been more than 14 years old, right? And Joseph was still a baby. These women did bring him increase, but the blessing was Jacob's before he even got there. That was ordained before he was born, and that was given to Rebecca while she was pregnant. These women were part of the fulfillment of that blessing. So what else can we learn about this story of 2 sisters and even their 2 maidservants? Jacob worked hard for them. He worked the additional 6 years for the flocks, so he prepared to take care of his household. We know that even though he was forced to love Leah in secret, she ended up being the one that he laid to in their final resting place. He laid next to. So from the scriptures, we have a horrible sibling rivalry that was set in motion by their father. And it started with heartache that went on even until it consumed Rachel while dying in birth and naming her son, son of my sorrows. It brought her a lot of pain till it killed her. It literally killed her, trying to produce something that she was not meant to produce. She already had that love. That's a lot. And what else do we learn from this? God shows us in a story where two women are placed in a situation completely against their desire by their father, that they're truly part of the greatest story ever told. They bore the 12 tribes of Israel. They also bore a lot of shame that was unnecessary, guilt that was unnecessary, loneliness, frustration, possibly depression. Strife. Either from not being able to conceive or not being loved at all. And a lot of us can really resonate with that. In the end, the unloved became the honored.
And the greatest of these is love.
Mm-hmm. How will we steer our own story? Who will we turn to? Because Leah turned to God and Rachel turned to idols. And in the end, looks didn't matter. Even the love that Jacob had wasn't enough to take her all the way back to his family burial ground for whatever reason. But when Jacob died, he had his sons carry his bones back there. So the question is, what will you let consume you? What have you been battling with? Because being a woman of valor doesn't mean that you're perfect and that you can do anything. Sometimes it really means that you have to have the courage to continue in the only situation you have. It's not fun, it's not enjoyable, it's not even comfortable. But that courage steps in and saying, this is your assignment. This is what God has said that you will be blessed through. If you just hang on for a bit. You got to find your joy where you can, right?
Yes.
You got to find your love where you can. Give increase where you can. Be strong where you're able to find strength. Because it does us no good to hold on to jealousy, to envy, to malice, or anything else. And God shows us through this story what they had inside of them. Not just their children, but through the names, we learned about their pain, their sorrows, and their joys. Leah found her joy in the Lord, the one true definition of love.
It's kind of sad that their life was mainly competition.
You hit it. Why do we waste our time trying to compete with others?
Because we want to feel loved. We want to feel validated.
We want to feel like we're women. And Rachel didn't feel woman enough when she couldn't produce.
We want to feel important.
And Leah didn't feel woman enough when she couldn't be loved. And so when we started Women of Valor, the first thing that we talked about is not comparing yourself to others, right? You can reflect on your life and on the lives of others, but when you start to compare, when you start to compete, that's a dangerous road.
Yeah.
Because you're not meant to walk the road of somebody else. You're not meant to live the life of somebody else. And the blessing that God has for you is for you. Yeah. What do you guys think about this story?
That's, there's a lot of things. Like I learned, it's like never thinking about the ancestry from Leah. So it brought me, and the well, like it just blew my mind that Jesus was at the same well.
Yep.
I think about Leah and her relationship with her sister, what it could have been had it not been that way.
What was it like
That they
before?
could have, two sisters, they could have had a good life, as sisters.
Yeah. They might have had a really strong relationship prior to that.
Yeah.
And did Laban know that he was pitting a sister against a sister? Because this also brought Laban wealth and status from his daughters having these grandchildren. So it increased his wealth as well. Do we know that Laban, that was in his mind, saying, if I pit this and get this, my wealth will increase as well?
Well, we know that Laban was a trickster, just like Jacob,
Right.
right? And he heard from God as well, because he exclaimed during part of this, he said, I am blessed for having you with me, right? Because I know that you are favored by God. And so my flocks have been increased and my land has been increased. Everything that he owned has increased, right? Because Jacob was with him. It wasn't until Jacob heard the groanings from Laban's sons saying, look, look at all he's taken from our father. His flocks are more, he's got our sisters and all these children. And so that jealousy that migrated onto Laban's sons brought another divide, where Jacob had to leave. And yes, this increase, this blessing was on Jacob, right? That came through Abraham.
He was serving God. Laban was in idolatry.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Laban was serving idols. Go ahead, Melva.
Yeah, and even in the midst of him serving, the idols, he still saw the favor of God.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Upon Jacob, because he wanted to use that for his own increase.
Yeah.
His ulterior motive.
Yes, he had an ulterior motive, and it also, shows us how when we become selfish and greed filled, how we plant roots of wickedness that produce branches of heartache and pain and suffering, for years to come, for family, friends, for our loved ones.
Exactly. Exactly.
We're so used to getting what we want. It's about what we want, or what we think is best for the future generation. Wealth. We're looking at wealth, but we're not looking. It's not even wealth. It's not even wealth. It's riches. Mm-hmm. We're looking at riches and not understanding what true wealth is. True wealth comes from above. It comes from God. All of the increases, worthwhile increases, come from God. But even then, he wasn't serving God. He was worshiping idols. So he didn't understand that, because he didn't have a relationship with God. But he knew the power of God. Because if he didn't know the power of God, he wouldn't have saw Jacob as being favored by God.
Even as Jacob was fleeing Laban, God came to Laban and said, make sure when you see Jacob, you don't say anything good or bad to him. Nothing. Which I found interesting. Not even a good thing. Don't even say anything good to him. Say your piece, but do not wish any harm on him or anything else.
So don't bless him and don't curse him.
Don't bless him, don't curse him, right? But I want you to see that God revealed himself to even somebody who didn't respect or know him or love him. A lot of us feel like we are too small for God to reveal himself to. But we're the exact person God wants to see him.
Think about the donkey
Yeah.
that revealed himself to Balaam.
Mhm. Yeah. Because
He
the
wasn't
angel of the
too-
Lord opened his mouth and showed him. He says, I was about to kill you, but your donkey was trying to save you. So this story, it doesn't show the favorable characteristics that we want to dwell on. But again, this is part of the time where we discuss our mistakes, our flaws, to prevent that from happening in future generations, right? And so you've got, like I said, you had two younger siblings striving for the birthright of the first, because Rachel was looking to be married above her sister, before her sister. Rachel was looking to have Jacob as the husband that her father promised and betrothed, but that was Leah's right. And so all this heartache, deception, treachery from Laban onto Rachel, right? And we think about how Judah did come from the line of Leah. And what we started out talking about earlier, about how sometimes what we do is not part of God's plan, but he takes it and he uses it for our good. And we know that through the story of Joseph, which is Rachel's son, right? Because when the brothers became jealous of him being the dreamer, they cast him into this not a well, but like this cave, right? And they sell him
A pit. I think it was a pit.
Yes, they cast him into a pit. They sold him on to some raiders. And God used everything that happened to Joseph to eventually save Jacob and his brothers.
The family is right.
Right,
It was a famine. It was a famine.
exactly.
And they came to him not recognizing him.
Yeah.
And he said, I will give you this. And then they were like, and then he gave him the coat and said, go take this back. Because the
Mhm,
coat of many colors was given to his father.
mhm.
Mm.
So God will repurpose our mess.
Mm.
Don't think that because you messed up, that you are now beyond sight of God. Don't think that because you have flaws that you can't be used by God. Don't think that because you got heartache that you are beneath the love of God.
Mm.
Because he will use you, he will see you, and he will heal your pain.
Thank you, Lord.
I
Mm.
thank him for my perfect, I mess up all the time. But it's also the humbleness of your heart.
Mhm. Yep. This whole story was something I never want to experience, right? These days, no, you don't want to share your husband. These two women did not want to share their husband, but they did with their slaves just to get back at each other. Not slaves, but maidservants.
Maidservants.
Just to get back at each other. Just to increase the pain that they were feeling onto their sibling. I'm in pain, now you have to hurt. That's what that was.
So Jenny, overall with this story, it made me think about how Laban kind of set this in motion. So I tried to personalize it, like as a parent, and we've touched on generational curses, how we are putting into play. Now these sisters are jealous, and now we've got jealousy in the picture. We've got envy in the picture. And how as parents or as adults are we making decisions that are going to affect our children for the rest of their lives that may not always be a positive? I use my birth father as an example, who had me while he was married, and that's why I was adopted, and then went on and married another lady and had 2 kids. Even though I'm new to knowing my siblings, I see the animosity because of the 2 moms that was created. I can use my father-in-law. When you talked about not sharing family secrets, I've always shared with my children the aspect that we don't like to talk about, the issue with the women, because that is not a characteristic that we want. I always called it a generational curse. And I said, this will be broken with this family. This will be broken right here. Out of Keith these, this curse will be broken. It is not going to continue through him. And I had to say that and profess that. But he was already saying that and professing unrighteousness. So he had to want it as well. But it's like you have to talk about those things and know also what you're up against. So, because if you keep it secret, it's going to be used against you and it's going to come up. And you got to call these things as they are and cast them down. So it kind of took me, like, well, what are we doing? What are we doing that may affect, our children and our heritage, further down the line.
Yeah, we do have to talk about these things.
That's
And
true.
in the
That
midst
is
of it, your kids might look at you like, why are you sharing this with me? Because I'm trying to prevent you from walking the same road.
Amen.
Yeah.
That's right.
You don't
That's
need to
right.
reinvent the
Oh.
wheel, especially if that wheel is broken. Don't
Right.
do it. Don't do it. So, this story is powerful because it shows us a different side of these women who are in our ancestry, who are in our historical lineage, right? In the story of Jesus. And we can learn so much good and so much wrong at the same time. And that's the point. We don't just learn the pretty. And that's actually what we learned from Leah, right? We don't just learn the Leah. We don't just learn the Rachel. We have to learn all aspects of it, because that is our fullness. That is our roundness of how to be, right? If you never know how to not act, what do? Because their behavior, and again, what I really don't like is that this was set in motion by their father. This is not a life that they would have chosen at all. But the bitterness inside of them literally consumed Rachel to the point where she died giving birth to a child that, again, he had 11 children at this point, 12, because Dinah was there, right? He had 11 sons and a daughter. But this competition was so unhealthy that it killed her. What are you dying to reach that it was not meant for you to have? We long for and desire things that are meant for somebody else, because we already have our joy that other people don't have. And we're too busy missing the love that we have and the purpose that we have, that we want somebody else's cake. You don't know what it's like to bake. So like we talked about when we were talking about our testimonies before we officially began, when you learn to appreciate what you have, what is given to you and your purpose, when you go to God and ask him for those things, for those blessings, because when Rachel finally went to God and asked, she was blessed with that. Her womb was open, right? Go to God to receive your joy. Go to God to receive your love. And he will bless you beyond measure with everything that was meant for you to have, for you to enjoy. Because even though Leah was not initially loved, she was honored in her final resting place. She did spend more years with Jacob, because after Rachel passed away, that was her by his side. There was no question as to who was his wife or which one was his wife anymore. It was her. And the one who thought that she could never be loved gave birth to the majority of the tribes of Israel. So when you think that you messed up, or that you've reached a part in your life where you just don't see anything happening any further, just stop for a moment. Realize who your God is, not who you are. Because he has the power to change everything, to create, to take away, to give, all of that. And what he has for you, what is your purpose, no man, no woman can take away. When you get distracted by other things that you want, you get in the way of those blessings. You create Ishmaels instead of Isaacs. So as we women of valor are studying these heroines, these female warriors in the Bible, it's not enough to just take all the great things they did. We have to learn from their mistakes as well. Stop competing against each other. Stop thinking that you have to be better than someone else or one up, and look in the mirror and say, God, what do you have for me? What do you need me to do today? I don't need to create all these other things or finish this laundry list of tasks that you meant for somebody else to accomplish. What'd you wake me up for today? You woke me up for something today. Help me to accomplish that. The Nobel Peace Prize might be for somebody else. What do you need Jenny to do today? So
Yeah. Don't be envious.
don't be envious.
Just because they were sisters, what about our spiritual sisters?
Yeah. Does anybody else have anything they want to add to the story? What they thought about this week's study?
It was good study.
Made you think, made you think, made you think.
I liked it. Okay, let's now all go on to prayer requests.